This is the Captain's Quinnie retro rebuild. My earliest memories of boating and fishing were aboard Dad's Quintrex Fish-Finder, very much like this one. As a kid, I used to spend hours watching his Super 8 films that featured his classic Quinnie. The videos captured his camping trips at Kangaroo Island, catching snapper and nanagai with old Mitchell reels, wearing stubbies that were way too tight, and aviators with gold that was way too blingy. There were no Yeti coolers placed strategically in the background, just Foster's cans and Melbourne long necks. They certainly weren't fishing for likes, they were fishing to fill up eskies. Dad shot goats off the cliffs as if he was Robert De Niro from The Deer Hunter. His mates, well, they're shooting black powder revolvers and other pistols at empty beer cans. And they seemed to spend a lot of time running around with no clothes on. Yeah, they were nude a lot. And Dad, he took that Quinnie everywhere. The Fish-Finder had a couple of blue band Mercury outboards and a paper sounder. Now the colour scheme on this boat was really something special. The bottom of the hull was dark poo. Wrapping around to the inside of the boat was basically the shades of baby poo. Now I managed to track down an original brochure, and this is from the 70s, so it's pretty cool. It says the Fish-Finder is the sister ship to the Fish-Master. Now they're both 5 metres. The Fish-Master is the cuddy cabin, and I used to think it was one of the ugliest tinnies going around, but it's kind of grown on me. The brochure reads, quote, "Quintrex have built them to go anywhere the fish are. Bump them, bang them, bounce them on trailers. You can't beat them for strength." It kind of explains why Malcolm Douglas, one of our heroes, he ran one for a while. The brochure says they have the famous flared bows to reduce spray and wide beam for stability. You can stand right aft in the corners of this boat. It has fishy features such as a tow rail mounted 4 inches above the inner floor. But wait, there's more. Standard equipment on the Fish-Finder is a live bait tank with 55 litres of capacity. Now personally, I can't imagine having an aquarium sitting in front of me and above my paper sounder, let alone my 12-inch Simrad. Now, to fill the live bait tank, there's this funky water scoop that shoots through the hull and works as a deck wash. That's pretty cool. And what about that colour? Well, the brochure says both models, the Fish-Finder and the Fish-Master, have dark painted bottoms to avoid frightening fish, particularly at night or on overcast days. And the interior should be called wattle, by the way, not baby poo. So I said to Jack, if we could have one more project boat, it would be a Quintrex 5-metre Fish-Finder. Now I asked him and he said nothing, but that's not unusual. But then it appeared on Facebook Marketplace and it was only 3 hours away in Micalago, just out of Canberra. Now the boat lived on a farm and the owner, Claudia, she'd never actually used it. Her bloke, he worked with the AFP. Now he was away catching bad guys or something. This is Claudia, and she's selling her husband's boat, and I just got to record this. Claudia said since the ad had gone up, she was getting harassed by people and that she'd be just happy for someone to look at it and buy it and get rid of it. I obliged. Now, we paid $2,500 for this boat and I could not hand over the money quickly enough. Sorry, Claudia, I probably would have paid a lot more for that boat. And the reason why, it hadn't been molested. The paint was original, it looked great on the sides. The bottom was a bit scuffed, but no deal breaker. There were no weld repairs and no signs of corrosion. The console wasn't chopped and the helm seat was there and intact, albeit it was full of water. Most importantly, I couldn't see any corrosion, which was great. In fact, the boat looked like it had been parked there about 40 years ago and just left. The only thing that wasn't original was this sort of disabled handrail that went all the way down the side of the boat. That definitely had to go. Even the Furuno paper sounder looked like it was about to spring into life. Jack loved that. Now, the trailer, it was pretty sad. There was a lot of rust, but amazingly, it survived the 4-hour journey back home. After some insincere apologies to the missus, I removed all the leaves and moss, hooked her up to a battery, fed some fuel and kicked her over. Despite all the cobwebs, the big Evinrude ticked over in a cloud of smoke. She was going. And that was moments before I unbolted her, put her on Marketplace and sold it. That was not going on the boat. Now once all the leaves, the moss, the rotten floor was taken out, I could get in and have a better look at some of her sins. The only major fail was a crack along the deck beam where it joins the bulkhead. Now local welder Benjamin got to work. Rather than weld over an already compromised bulkhead, he fabricated a new 3mm section, folded it and welded it into the structure. Then he welded new bollards and cut the disabled handrails off. Jesus, that was aggressive. While we had Ben's attention, I got him to look over the original fuel tank. Bearing in mind this is 45 years old. The rattling sound was pretty ominous, but after Ben cut it open, we discovered it was just a corroded sender. He gave me a bottle of Albright aluminium cleaner and told me to splash it on, sit for a few minutes, then wash it off. Just for insurance, he welded a new 3mm bottom and new 3mm top on the tank. And Benny reckons we saved about $1,000 not having to get a whole new fuel tank rebuild. If this one shits itself, maybe I will spend the $1,000. When it comes to restoring old tinnies, Ben says don't even bother if they're corroded. Well, cracks, they can be repaired, but it could be a sign that the structure is on its last legs. He's not a fan of doing too much welding on older, pressed tinnies as the heat can warp the alley out of shape. Thankfully, he rated the old Quinnie. He said, bloody good, well built, with quality aluminium. He particularly liked the 12mm plate that someone had welded to the transom. Now, replacing the floor, that ended up being one of the biggest jobs, and it also cost a bit of money as well. Now, 12mm ply, it doesn't come cheap at about $200 a sheet, but it's still half the price of Thermalite. Old school boat builders swear by it. It's easy to work with, flexes just enough to conform to the floor shapes we needed, and once fiberglassed, it will outlive the captain's crew. We recruited neighbour Chris to help cut out the floor sections. How good are old boats?
Yeah, old boats are good.
Now, Chris's first bit of advice is start with good templates, ideally the ones that came out of the boat. When you cut them out, make them a little bit larger and you can trim them down to size. For a nice finish, router the edges. We replaced the timber helm section and console top with 12mm marine ply, covering the end grain with milled pine. 7 layers of marine varnish, but we reckon it's the centerpiece of the tinny and well worth the time and effort. And then we gave the transom shield at the back the same timber and varnish finish, as well as on the little auxiliary motor. With the floor sections done, it was down to white pointer boats where Wally was going to help us wrap them in glass.
Well, it's that time of month again, and well, Trav's bought us another gem. This time a little bit better than what he's bought us before. We've got a Quintrex Fish-Finder. But look, it needed a bit of work, not to the hull, but to the floor. So we're actually putting in a new ply floor for him. There's not too much work to do. A lot of the floor's already been cut out for us, which has been fantastic. We then have to glass them. But the key steps to getting a good floor is to glass it properly and seal it up. Key steps are marine grade plywood for one. Don't use chipboard, don't use MDF like a lot of people do. That's just ridiculous. We then scuff up the plywood so it's quite rough. That way it absorbs the resin, soaks it in. So the next step would be to soak the plywood in resin, especially the edges, so it gets in. We scuff it up so the resin actually bites into the plywood and soaks in. That way it gives us a good bond. We then put a 600 gram mat on with resin, roll it in, consolidate it. Then after that, it'll look like that finished. And then once it's gone off, or almost gone off, to make it easier for yourself, instead of sanding up a big edge that's been wetted out, when it's almost gone off, we can use a Stanley knife, trim it up, that way the sand is a little bit less for later on. Two main reasons for fiberglassing your floor, and even though it's only a tinny floor, it gives the floor strength and it also seals it against water, which eventually leads to rot, so well worth doing.
With the floors glassed, Wally then coated them in flow coat. As he points out, fiberglass is still porous, so flow coat just gives that extra barrier of protection from moisture. Once more moisture gets in there, it's all over. With the number of project boats we've got under our belt, you'd think we'd have some sort of degree in boat restoration, wouldn't you? Well, no, we don't. And we stumbled. Remember the old saying, measure twice, cut once, Yeah, we forgot that bit when it came to fitting the new Tohatsu motor. Turns out it doesn't share the same bolt hole pattern as an old Evinrude. Fuck it. The transom plate had to come off. Yep, the same one Chris spent days painting with 7, count them, 7 coats of varnish.
We're taking it off.
During this process, we came to learn why Wally doesn't recommend using Sikaflex to fit components. Fitting new engines.
Don't use Sikaflex.
As we removed the transom board, the timber actually delaminated before the Sikaflex gave way. That's how strong this shit is. After chiseling and swearing for about an hour, the transom was finally removed and returned to Chris in 1,000 pieces. Hey buddy, made that transom shield. I'm gonna need another one.
Fuck, mate. How much more material do you think we've got?
It's a different bolt hole pattern. I'm really sorry, mate.
We should have
cut once.
known that.
Then it was back to welder Ben to get the old holes welded and filled. Then down the road to Ben Holding from Sapphire Marine to get some new engine holes drilled. Ben's first job is to find the dead center of the transom. And he does that with a tool or a jig, let's say, that was put together by his father, Wayne. This tool resembles a giant compass with a sliding pencil at one end. Its job is to take a mark from either side of the transom at various points. The pencil is located just over the center line or just over halfway to the other side of the boat. Once the measurements are taken from each side, the center line will appear around the overlapping pencil marks. A set square is then run down the center line to determine dead center. You can also check these measurements with a tape measure. Now, an engine jig, technically called a transom drill fixture, is placed over the transom and along the center line. Then it's just a matter of determining the correct engine model and drilling away. Ben says the biggest challenge when determining the center line is that some boats aren't symmetrical. And in fact, some name boats that you might be surprised are far from symmetrical. But mum's the word on that one. No kiss and tell from the captain. For the final fit up, we entrusted Samson and Derek Rodway from Good Times Marine. Now, one thing we wanted in this console was really good steering. Jack and I have owned way too many consoles with crappy steering. Now, it's usually cable, and cable with sharp angles, salt water and zero maintenance equals shit steering. Now the first job is to get rid of the old seized cable steering, and that was a job in itself. Based on the damage to the inside of the transom, Samson correctly assumed that it was done with an angle grinder. What's wrong with that? With all that in mind, we wanted to have really good steering in the Quinnie. We decided on Dometic C-Star hydraulic steering. It's easy to install, it's compact, it doesn't corrode in the salty stuff, and doesn't require too much maintenance. You can also get helms in different sizes. The bigger the helm, the less turns required. We went with a Dometic C-Star front mount helm with 1.7 cubic inch displacement. So that means we've got 5 locks to turn.
Hydraulic steering just means it's comfortable and it's consistent. When you're turning the wheel from hard left to hard right, it's the exact same resistance that you're going to be dealing with. So you're not having to grab with 2 hands waiting for the kick. It's just easy. You can even do it with 1 finger the way it's set up. So if we have a look at the parts that go together to form the steering system in this Quintrex, we've got this amazing steering wheel. Anyone who doesn't mind a bit of retro is going to appreciate the condition of this steering wheel. Attach the steering wheel to the helm and you're getting close to getting this system rolling. Now the helm holds the bulk of the oil fluid in the steering system. At the back here you can see the bolts that will go through to connect the helm to the console, and then we've got the lines that are going to come out of the helm here. In the actual helm, you've got, this is your location for your steering wheel. It comes in across this shaft here. And this little knob here, this is the access point to the reservoir of the helm, and which you're gonna have full of fluid. When you're replacing the helm into your dash, have a good look at the dash. Make sure structurally it's really, really strong. If you're pushing the boat pretty hard or you're in rough water conditions, there's a lot of leverage that happens with the steering wheel on this part. And if your helm isn't up to scratch, you might find that the breakage isn't in the steering wheel, it's actually the part that's holding this helm in place. The helm's really, really compact. It only requires a 3-inch hole in your dash. So if you're retrofitting mechanical steering out of your boat and you're upgrading to hydraulic, you'll find it's quite easy and without mucking up the presentation of your helm. If we move across to the lines, and these lines are semi-flexible hose lines. You can get fully flexible hose lines as well. The trick with these is making sure that they don't kink. If you get any kink in this line, it's pretty much going to eliminate your ability to steer the boat. So it's important when these get run down the boat, they've got a nice clean run and there's no chance of the steering line bending in any way. At the end of these hoses here, we've got the transom plate. Now this is where the lines run from the internal of your boat through the back of your bulkhead, which is usually surrounding the back of where the engine is there. And then your lines at this side, on the engine side, are going to connect to the bullhorn here, which is connected to your engine. If you've got a bit of a tight steering situation like the guys here with their Quintrex, you can use offsets here to allow the steering helm to go into the console further to give you a little bit more room behind the steering wheel. There's a few different options available to suit individual boat situations. The key component in the hydraulic steering system is what we call the bullhorn. This is the part that bolts onto the outboard and gives you all your steering control. You can see on here we've also got the part where the hydraulic lines connect. The next stage is fitting your bullhorn to the motor. The engine's got to come off the transom in almost every case. The bullhorn's got to go on. All the fittings should be in the kit that you've chosen specifically for your engine. There is a kit for every single engine brand, so you need to be aware of that. Once your bullhorn's fitted in place, you're ready to put your engine back on your transom, connect all your lines. Remember, we're using the proper gear when it comes to putting the oil into your hydraulic lines. And then if you're going to do it manually, you need to use these hoses, and you're going to be bleeding the steering, turning your wheel left, turning it right, and you're going to watch that oil drain out of these bottles into these lines, into the reservoir, and that's going to be going up and down, and you'll see air bubbles coming out into the tube, which is the air cleaning itself out of the system. When it comes to hydraulic steering installation, you can do it yourself. The captain guys thought about it and then thought they might trust people that have done it before like us. So when it comes to steering, you can definitely give it a crack. It does take a little bit of time and effort, and you don't want to stuff it up. So in the point of fear, trust people that know what they're doing. Once you've done a double check of everything, that all your fittings are tight, there's no oil leaks anywhere, I reckon you're ready to go down the water and see how it goes.
Now, Samson is also given responsibility for wiring the tinny. His advice is to plan your fit up beforehand so you know how many wires you're running. He likes to use a bit of string to measure the run from the helm to the motor and the batteries. Then make everything outside the boat. Run the wiring and loom in a split tube, especially in an alloy boat that potentially has sharp edges. For joining wiring, Samson reckons crimps and heat shrink is fine. Just make sure each line is fused, labelled and accessible. And don't forget spare fuses. Now, the bilge was a real focus area for us considering the age of the boat. We've also heard of too many boats that sink because the bilges just didn't do their job. We got Samson to fit 2 in here, both with float switches. They're running 1,100 gallons per hour. Now, you're probably wondering how the captain gets paid. We get paid in all sorts of ways: beer, rum, crayfish banquets, sunglasses, sometimes multifunction displays. And as it happens, on one particular job, we got paid with this Simrad 12-inch Evo 3S screen. And it fits perfectly in this recess underneath the dash. Sadly, the old Furuno paper sounder had to come out. Jack was a bit devout about that, but at the end of the day, this is a boat we're actually going to use. We want to be able to get there, find fish, and get home as well. So this tinny, it's not a garden ornament. It's built to fish, with apologies to Surtees. Now, by this stage, the Quintrex was looking a little bit battle weary, particularly at the top where we'd remove some handrails. We had planned on leaving it patina, which is original worn condition, but it was clear we needed some fresh paint on top. We headed to Bristol Paint Centre in Pambula for a solution. Over to you, Mick.
I'm Mick Greeley from Bristol Paints in Pambula, and we're in Pambula, which is the capital of paint.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. So this little device from Concept Paints is just a colour reader. What it does is take a little spectro photo there, it shoots a heap of light into the colour, brings up its own suggested colour on what it thinks is going to be the closest, and then we literally just put it into our system over here. Once we get the recipe up, we just put it into one of these 2-pack cans. The way that they work is once the colour's in there, This little red cap comes out, goes on the bottom there like that. Once you put this on, you jam it in, shake it up for about 5 minutes. The hardener's released into the product then, the paint, and you've got about 90 minutes or so to use it. Yeah, great colour match and a lot harder wearing in a 2-pack compared to all the other types of paints you can get in a single pack spray can. So you can see paint's still in pretty good condition after 45 years. Obviously the bits where it's bare there, that's where it really needs the most attention, especially the etch primer. All you need to do is just hit it with some sandpaper, anything from 320, depending on how rough it needs to be, you could go to 240. Once that's done and you've cleaned the surface with some wax and grease remover or Prepsol, then you can etch prime any bare areas and then you're good to go the next day. Paint over the top, any bare steel or any welds, just all you need to do is etch prime it, hit it with your paint, and obviously it's going to wrap a little bit and run a little bit, so just try and do it lightly around. You're always better doing a couple of light coats or more light coats than you are doing 1 or 2 heavy ones.
Now, next job on the Quintrex Fish-Finder was flooring. We contemplated keeping it flow coat, which is, I guess, fairly close to original, but the kids weren't having a bar of it. They reckoned it'd have to have the cool, grippy flooring with words and pictures on it, or they weren't coming fishing. Now, you know the captain's opinion on this stuff. We reckon EVA flooring is a must-have for comfort and safety, but also takes the clangy noise out of tinnies. It's also cool underfoot and looks bloody awesome. About the only downside with this EVA flooring is the cost, but Deck Armour are trying to make it more accessible. They've got these new DIY kits. We spoke to the boss of Deck Armour, Josh Goodvin, and he said that the idea of a project boat is that you've accomplished something special and cool and original, and he really wanted that to flow through to the flooring. So he brought out these DIY kits, which actually also ended up 30% cheaper. Now you can look down at your floor and say, I made that as well. Now the DIY kit includes templating plastic. This stuff won't stretch, it won't crease or tear. All you do is place the template over the flooring section and tape it up so it won't move. Then you mark the plastic with a permanent marker. If you do make a mistake, there's no dramas, just wipe the texture mark off with acetone and start again. So one tip from Josh is leave a gap from the flooring edge, about 15 to 20 mil, and avoid going over radiuses, which is essentially round edges. In our case, the floor was totally removable, so it was piss easy just to mark out. We also made a texture mark where we wanted some cool little fish rulers and some retro Quintrex logos. I just forgot to put the dot on the eye for the Quintrex when I sent it to Josh. That really sucks. So once you've marked up your template, you fold it all back up, put it back in the box that the boys sent you, and mail it back to the Deck Armour crew. These guys are ex-sign writers, so they've got a great eye. They'll put together some really good designs, some different colours and some different patterns, and they'll give you some options to have a muck around with. It's really fun when you get those through, actually, and you get to sort of like bring your boat to life. Now, on Josh's recommendation, we painted the floor edges black, which helped pick up the black underlay in the Deck Armour. The final colour was natural teak that we reckon brings all those poo colours together very nicely. We got our good mate Simon Montgomery, who normally sews together inflatable boats. We got him to do the upholstery on the seat. He did a really nice job. Mind you, it took us a couple of goes to get the colour right. You're probably wondering about the power plant. That's a 70 horsepower Tohatsu 2-stroke. It actually came from another project which you don't know about. Sadly, we had to let one go. Why a 2-stroke Tohatsu, you ask? Well, it's Japanese quality and 2-stroke simplicity. They're bulletproof, at least according to former local Tohatsu dealer Alan Fraser, who has one fitted to every ship he owns. The Toei is around the weight of the lightest 4-stroke, but it delivers all that power with far less moving parts. So we reckon there's less things to go wrong. But the main reason we went for a 2-stroke, that sound. And that smell that just takes me back to those childhood days in the tinny with Dad. Just in case we do get run off the water by the greenies, I've got this little Tohatsu 6 horsepower 4-stroke. It's actually for trolling for trout, when my eardrums burst, or the two-banger blows to kingdom come. Given the Quinnie was built for epic fishing trips and sentimental reasons, it was going to need a set of wheels. Very big wheels. The trailer that got our attention was the Mackay KRX. We don't reckon there's a better looking trailer going around. We first spotted one of these Mackay trailers in Yeppoon of all places. It was sitting behind a jacked up Isuzu with the number plates Eat a 79. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Now Mackay, the guys who built this trailer, have been around for about 40 years. They're Australian made, and I think that ties in really well with this tinny. It's 45 years old, it's Australian made as well. I do love the look of this trailer. It has that come at me attitude with 15-inch Land Cruiser rims and shock absorbers. This model also has a drop-down spare wheel for beach launching and an extendable drawbar for taking it out a further 1.7 metres. I will admit the suspension is a little bit overkill. It features heavy-duty galvanised 8-leaf off-road springs, but hey, that's just a great excuse to pack the shit out of this boat and head north. North. The trailer was a bit of a budget blowout. It's a tick over 15 grand, but we reckon it's worth it, particularly if we're going to do the miles, and it just looks fucking cool. Now that it's all said and done, what do we think? It's definitely true love. It actually probably ended up better, looking better and cooler than what I first imagined. We probably went overboard, particularly with the trailer, the deck armour, the Simrad, but hey, if you can, why the fuck not? It does live up to its promise on the water. It's very nippy, but it's very predictable. It is a little bouncy in the front end, particularly without weight, but it is an exceptional fishing platform, and there's plenty of room to get in aft in the sides, as promised. It is quite a low profile, and I was a bit, I had some reservations about that, but for fishing it's great. You know, here up the river you can climb in and out of it, you can manage fish, you can manage squid, the kids can handle fish quite comfortably, and if you want to push the kids in, it's very easy, just push them straight over. In terms of overall value, there's probably about 40 grand retail in that boat, but if you consider that the Simrad, the transducer and the trailer are about 20 grand on their own, I think 20 grand sitting there is bloody good value, particularly when you consider the sentimental value. So, you know, recapturing a little bit of my youth has been cool. Just one look at her and we want to get out there and use it, which we plan to do. Boys, get the gunpowder, get a slab of Foster's, get a couple of long necks, we're going to Kangaroo Island. Just don't forget your bloody pants.